My name is Lena Hart, and 3 weeks ago, I buried my mother. 5 days after that, I ended a 6-year relationship that had already died long before I had the courage to say it aloud, and now, I'm living alone in the house where I grew up. A place that still smells like lavender and winter dust and something hollow in the walls. I thought the hardest part would be the silence, but it wasn't. The hardest part was waking up that morning, cold sheets tangled around my legs, dreams still clawing at the back of my throat, and realizing I wasn't alone. He was already watching me at a dog. A large, silent shadow at the foot of my bed. First, I thought I was still dreaming. He sat perfectly still. His dark fur shimmered in the faint morning light, ragged in places. His eyes, a golden brown, not quite amber, not quite human, stared into mine with a weight I can only describe as knowing. I froze. My breath caught in my chest. My hand twitched toward my phone on the nightstand. He didn't growl. Didn't move. Just watched. I whispered, "Who are you?" No bark. No blink. I sat up slowly, every muscle in my body stiff with fear and disbelief. The house had been locked. I was sure of it. The windows were shut tight. The front and back doors bolted. So how the hell was there a dog in my bedroom? I inched my legs off the side of the bed. My bare feet met the cold floorboards with a small creak. His ears perked, but he didn't rise. That was when I saw the dirt smudged on his paws. The slight tremble in his hind leg. The way his ribs strained under his fur, not starved, but definitely not fed, and something in me shifted, not fear. Not exactly. Not anymore. Something like déjà vu. Like I knew this dog. Or maybe he knew me. The sun was just beginning to paint soft lines across the walls when I coaxed him downstairs. I expected him to bark, to bolt, to show some sign that he was, in fact, a normal stray, but he didn't. He followed. Quietly. No collar. No tags. No hesitation. I opened the back door and stepped aside. "Go on," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "You found your way in. You can find your way out." He stared at the threshold like it was foreign territory. Then turned back toward me. His eyes met mine again, not pleading, but asking. Like I had the answer to a question I didn't know had been asked. I gave him food, old toast from the counter. He took it gently from my hand, careful not to touch my skin. When I reached out to pet him, he flinched, just slightly, then sat back on his haunches. So I didn't push it. I just let him stay. I made calls. The local shelter was at capacity. The vet was closed for the weekend. I posted a picture on Facebook with the caption, "Anyone missing a ghost who looks like a wolf and doesn't blink?" No one replied and no one ever claimed him. The next night, I couldn't sleep. A grief doesn't come in waves. It comes in sudden silences, in the moments where you realize no one's going to call you just to ask if you've eaten. I lay curled on my side, staring at the edge of the mattress, wondering if I'd made a mistake by coming back here. Bye. Trying to hold on to a life that was already gone, and then I felt it, that stare again. I turned my head, and there he was, lying at the foot of the bed. Watching me. Eyes wide open. Chest rising slowly. He didn't move, and neither did I. We just stayed like that. Two broken things pretending we were whole enough to sleep. The house creaked all night, like it was remembering something it couldn't say out loud. I didn't close my eyes again until the sun started to rise, and when I did, when sleep finally took me, I dreamed of running, barefoot through the woods. Branches tearing at my nightgown. My heartbeat thudding louder than the wind. I wasn't afraid, but I was chasing something I couldn't see, and somewhere behind me. I knew he was following, not hunting, protecting. I woke up gasping, and he was already watching me. This time, I whispered, "You're still here." And for the first time, just the slightest motion, his tail flicked against the wood floor. I named him Echo that morning. Not because he answered when I called, but because he didn't. Because he was a reflection of everything I couldn't say. He didn't bark. Didn't whine. Didn't beg, but when I walked into the kitchen, he followed. When I stood at the sink washing a single coffee mug, he lay behind me, watching. When I went outside to take the trash out, he sat at the window, unmoving, eyes fixed, and When I came back in, it was like he hadn't moved at all that afternoon. I found an old picture in the attic. Me, maybe 6 or 7, in a red coat far too big for me. My mother smiling beside me. And at our feet, a dog, not him. Not Echo, but close. I don't know why, but I stared at the photo for a long time. There was something in the posture. The stillness. The silent loyalty. I ran my finger over the face of that dog, then looked at the one lying beside me now. Echo blinked once, and I swear to God, it was like he understood. That night, I cried for the first time since the funeral, not because I was alone, but because, for the first time, I wasn't. I sobbed into the darkness, trying to be quiet, trying not to unravel completely. But the sobs came anyway, ragged and sharp and full of everything I'd shoved down for weeks. I didn't hear him move, but suddenly he was there on the bed, beside me, not touching, never touching, but close enough that I could feel the heat of him, and his eyes never left mine. He didn't look away, it didn't flinch, just watched me, held me there with his gaze like a thread that wouldn't break. I don't know why you're here, I whispered through tears. But please. Don't go. And for the first time since he appeared, he made a sound, a soft, breathy whine, like he'd been holding it in until I needed it most. In that moment, I didn't care how he got in. Or why he'd chosen me. All I knew was this: the silence didn't scare me anymore, because now it echoed back. I started noticing it more the next day, how Echo never looked away. When I walked into the living room, he was already watching. When I sat down with my coffee, he adjusted his position so he could keep me in view. When I went upstairs, I heard the soft creak of paws on the wood floor behind me, always just enough distance to be polite. But his gaze never broke at first. It was comforting, then it started to unnerve me, not in a threatening way. Echo never made a sound, never stepped out of line. But there was something in the intensity of it, like I was a puzzle he couldn't solve. Or maybe something broken he couldn't look away from. I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror that morning. Pale skin, hair pulled up in a lazy knot, dark circles I hadn't seen on my own face before. Echo appeared behind me, just a shadow. In the background, I looked back at him through the mirror and said softly, "What do you see when you look at me like that?" Of course, he didn't answer. He never did. Later that afternoon, I tried to take him for a walk. I found an old leash in the shed, one my parents must have used for our family dog years ago. When I held it up, Echo's ears twitched. But he didn't move. "Come on," I coaxed gently. "Let's see what's out there." He followed. Slow and steady. No pulling, no sniffing like a curious pup. Just that same watchfulness, eyes flicking toward me every few seconds, like I might disappear if he didn't keep checking that we didn't go far. Just down the road past the mailbox, where the trees began to thicken and the gravel faded into packed earth. The forest had always made me feel small, even as a kid. Now, it felt vast and oddly familiar, like it was holding its breath. Echo stopped just before the tree line, his body stiffened. I turned to him. "Something wrong?" He didn't growl. But he didn't move either. His ears were pinned back, his body tense, his gaze locked on the shadows between the trees. I scanned the woods. Nothing. Just wind and birds and the distant rustle of branches, but Echo wouldn't go further, not one step. Instead, he circled back and nudged my leg with his nose. The first time he had ever touched me. He wanted to go home. That night, I couldn't get the forest out of my head. I tossed and turned in bed, Echo curled at the foot, always watching, always still. The silence of the house pressed against my chest. A grief is like a fog, thick and slow. But fear cuts through fog like a knife. I didn't want to admit it, but I'd felt something out there. Not danger, exactly. Just presence. Like Echo had seen something I couldn't, and then I remembered. The dreams, the running. The whisper of paws behind me. Always close. Always catching up. I stared at the ceiling and whispered, "Who are you really?" No response, but a soft whine drifted up from the end of the bed. Not pain. Not fear. Just acknowledgement. The next morning, I awoke to Echo's eyes, as always, fixed on mine. This time, I didn't flinch. I sat up, rubbing sleep from my face, and asked, "Do you sleep at all?" He didn't answer, but I swear he blinked once, slowly, like a nod. I spent the day cleaning out my mom's old studio. The room hadn't been touched in years, not since she got sick. Dust clung to the windows. Her easel still stood in the corner, draped in a faded blue cloth. Sketchbooks were stacked haphazardly, half filled with dreams and drafts that never made it onto canvas. I used to sit in here for hours as a kid, watching her paint. Sometimes she'd let me mix colors. Other times, she'd chase me out when the light changed and inspiration struck like lightning. I hadn't stepped foot in here since the funeral. Hecko followed me in, padding softly over the creaking floorboards. He sniffed the corner of the room, then settled by the window like it was a post he'd been assigned. I pulled the cloth from the easel that a half-finished painting of the woods behind our house. The trees were done in deep strokes of green and gray. But the center was empty, a clearing left white and undefined. I stared at it for a long time. Something about it made my stomach twist. Behind me, I felt Echo stand. Slowly. Quietly that he walked up beside me and sat down, eyes locked on the painting, and for the first time, I wondered if he recognized it too. I stayed in the studio long after sunset. I found old pictures tucked in drawers, my mother younger, brighter. Me with missing teeth and scraped knees. And then one photo I didn't recognize. It was dated 2002. I would have been around 9 in. The picture, I was sitting cross-legged in the grass. With a dog. It wasn't Echo, but it could have been his twin. Same deep eyes. Same dark fur. Same solemn posture. The handwriting on the back read, Lena and a shadow, summer, before he disappeared. I don't remember this dog. I should. I loved animals, always begged for one. But there's nothing in my mind that links me to this animal. No memories, no stories. Just the photo. I showed it to Echo. He didn't move, but something in his face changed. His head tilted slightly, ears twitching. Recognition. That night, I didn't sleep. Echo stayed by the window. Watching, and not me this time. The woods, just after midnight, I heard it. A single, sharp bark from outside. Not Echo. A different dog, distant. Hollow. Echo didn't react, but his body stiffened again, like it had on the trail. I got up and moved to the window. Nothing, just the shadows of the trees, but I felt it. Like something had passed through the air. A shift. A whispered. I turned back to Echo. His eyes were still locked on the darkness beyond the glass, and I realized then, he wasn't just watching me, yet he was guarding me. I crawled back into bed, pulling the blankets to my chin. My heart was racing. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. Echo walked over slowly and lay down beside me. For the first time, he rested his head against my arm. A warmth bloomed in my chest. I wanted to cry. Maybe I did, and in that moment, with my hand resting on his fur, and my breath starting to slow, I whispered, please don't leave me. He didn't move. Didn't blink, just watched. Grief has a way of catching you sideways. You think you're coping, you're eating, showering, even talking out loud to your dog, but then something small tips the whole thing over. For me, it was a voicemail. I hadn't checked my phone in days. I didn't want to. Every vibration felt like a demand. But that morning, after barely sleeping, I tapped open my messages and saw her name. Mom, still saved like that, like she might call again someday, and there it was. One unheard message from 3 months ago. I must have missed it during one of those long hospital nights when I didn't want to hear anything. I didn't hesitate. I played it. Hi, sweetheart. I just wanted to say I'm proud of you. For everything. I know I haven't said that enough. Call me when you can. That was at 16 seconds, and it destroyed me. I dropped the phone. Sank to the floor. My back hit the wall of the hallway like my legs had given up. Echo came running from the kitchen, no hesitation, no distance this time. He pressed his body to my side like he knew exactly where the pain was sitting, and I, stupid, overwhelmed, drowning, shoved him away. Stop. Just stop. I cried, my voice ragged and sharp. He stepped back, startled. His ears flattened. I can't do this, I whispered, half to him, half to myself. I can't keep pretending I'm okay, just because you're here. You're not her. You're not a miracle. He stood in the hallway, watching. Tail still, chest rising with slow, even breaths. His gaze held no judgment. No resentment. Just quiet waiting. I didn't ask for you, I snapped. Still, he didn't move. Didn't blink. Didn't leave. I stayed curled on the floor for what felt like hours. I don't even know if I cried or just shut down. The numbness came next, like cold fog flooding my chest. Eventually, I pulled myself up. I didn't look at him. I walked past him, into the kitchen, and slammed the cabinet doors louder than necessary as I searched for something to distract me, crackers, a coffee mug, anything. Behind me, I felt it, his eyes still following. The next 2 days, I barely spoke. Echo remained a silent shadow. He didn't try to cuddle. Didn't intrude. Just stayed near. Like gravity. Like breath. That second night, I didn't let him in my room. I shut the door. I sat awake most of the night on the edge of the bed, listening for him. Wondering if he was still there. By morning, when I opened the door, he was lying curled up against it. Like a soldier outside a queen's chamber. He blinked up at me once. No bark. No wag, just presence. Something cracked in me then, not all at once. Just a little, enough to whisper, "I'm sorry." He stood, stretched, and followed me downstairs as if nothing had changed, and maybe nothing had, except me. Later that day, I called the vet. I told myself it was just to check his leg, that slight limp he still carried. But part of me was ready to do something again. Even something small. The receptionist said they had a cancellation, so we went. Echo sat perfectly still in the passenger seat. I hadn't expected him to get in the car so easily. He didn't pace or pant. He just sat, watching the trees blur past the window like he already knew where we were going. At the clinic, the vet, a gentle woman named Dr. Ramos, examined him carefully. "He's older than I thought," she murmured. "At least 9 or 10. But his heart's strong. No microchip, though." She paused at his leg. "Looks like an old injury. Maybe a sprain that never healed right. Nothing we can do now except keep him comfortable." She looked at me then. "Has he bonded with you?" I laughed under my breath. "He watches me constantly. Like he's guarding me." Her face softened. "Some dogs do that. Especially rescues. They find someone to hold on to, and they don't let go. Even when we push them away. Especially then." We drove home in silence. That evening, I let him back into my room. He curled at the end of the bed like he always had, but I noticed how he didn't settle until I lay down. Like he wouldn't rest until I did. Something about that stayed with me, the way he made space for my pain. Without questions. Without expectations. I had another dream. This time, I wasn't running, but I was standing in the clearing from my mother's painting, the one she'd never finished. The woods were silent, the trees heavy with shadow, and in the clearing, Echo stood across from me, except it wasn't quite him. He looked younger. Stronger. His fur glowed in the moonlight. And his eyes, they weren't brown. They were glowing blue, like embers from a dying fire. I didn't speak. I couldn't, but he did, not with words. With stillness. With gaze. He turned once, looked toward the trees, then back at me, and I knew something was coming, something that had nothing to do with grief. I woke with my heart racing. It was still dark outside. Echo was beside the bed, head up, eyes wide. He was watching the window. I sat up slowly. "Did you feel that too?" He didn't move. But his ears twitched. His body was alert, tense, like a bow drawn back. I stood and crossed to the window, and froze. Down at the edge of the forest, where the trees met the grass, a shape stood, not a person, not a deer, another dog, larger than Echo. Still as stone, watching, the same way Echo watched me. I turned. Echo hadn't moved, but he was growling now, low, deep, almost imperceptible. I reached back for him instinctively. My fingers brushed his fur, his muscles were tight under my touch, but he didn't look at me, just stared, and then, as silently as it had appeared, the figure vanished, gone. No sound. No rustling leaves. I pressed my forehead to the glass, breath fogging the pain. Nothing. The Echo's growl faded, his body relaxed. He turned to me, and for the first time in days, he leaned in, gently, and licked my hand once, soft, forgiving and present. I whispered, "I don't know what that was. But I think you do." He lay down at my feet, still unmoving, and once again, watching. Echo didn't sleep that night, and neither did I. Even after the shadow vanished from the tree line, he remained by the window. Silent. Still. Watching. I curled under the blanket, trying to keep my breath steady, but my thoughts swirled like a storm, memories, questions, and something deeper. A pull. A warning, whatever I had seen, whatever he had sensed, wasn't over to it hadn't even begun the. Next morning, the world looked normal again. Birds chirped. The sky was a soft blue brushed with morning haze. The forest stood quiet, just trees and wind and memory, but Echo didn't move from the window and he didn't follow me downstairs like he usually did. He stayed at his post, eyes trained on the woods, and I didn't ask him to come. Later that afternoon, I decided to return to my mother's studio. I wasn't sure why. Maybe I hoped the painting, that incomplete forest scene, might offer something I'd missed before. Echo finally followed me. Not beside me this time, but behind me, slow and deliberate, as if each step meant something. When I entered the studio, the light had shifted. It slanted across the room in golden strips, illuminating the canvas with an almost otherworldly glow. I walked straight to the easel of the trees. The soft gray strokes. The same white space in the center, empty, untouched, but something was different. I leaned closer. There were faint marks in the blank space now, barely visible scratches, like the beginnings of a shape. Claw marks? Brush strokes, had my mother added those before she passed? Had I just missed them before? Echo sat down beside me, and that's when I noticed it. The painting wasn't finished, but it wasn't incomplete either. It was waiting. I found another photo that night. It was tucked in one of my mother's sketchbooks, between pages of forest outlines and color swatches. A blurry photo. Old and sun-faded. It showed a girl, me, I think, standing in the woods, and beside her, that same dog from the earlier photo. Shadow. Except now, I could see it clearly. The trees around him had no shadows. No depth. Like he didn't belong to the light or the land. Like he was between something. Beneath the photo, written in shaky pencil, were 5 words: he always comes back, Lena. I dropped the picture. Echo, I breathed, staring at him. He was lying by the studio door, head on his paws, watching me with the same calm, burning eyes he always had, but this time I felt it. He knew things I didn't, things I couldn't. That night, the dreams returned, but this time, I wasn't alone in the clearing. I was kneeling in the grass, my hands shaking, and in front of me stood Echo, his body glowing faintly at the edges, as if he were lit from within. All around us, the forest pulsed with silence. The trees were wrong. Too tall. Too still. Too aware. Echo stepped forward, and behind him, from the shadows, came another figure, the second dog, the one from the tree line, only now I could see him clearly, larger. Darker. Eyes red and empty and yet familiar. Echo turned his head toward me, slowly, and I heard the words not with my ears, but in my bones: you have to choose. I jolted awake, sweat drenched my back. My sheets were twisted, my pulse thundering in my ears, and Echo? He was standing beside the bed, staring at me, waiting. I got up and stumbled downstairs, trying to shake the dream off me like wet clothes, but it clung, and worse, it felt real. I poured a glass of water with trembling hands. Echo, I whispered. What are you? He patted down the stairs after me, and I swear, I saw it in his eyes then. Not human. Not beast, something older, something watching through the veil. That morning, I walked into town. I needed something. Air. People. Normalcy. At the general store, I bumped into Mrs. Willard, the town's unofficial historian and full-time rumor mill. Oh, Lena, she gasped, eyes wide. It's so good to see you out. I was just talking to your mother about you before her voice trailed off awkwardly. I forced a polite smile. Thanks. I'm taking it one day at a time. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. Are you back up at the house alone? I nodded. You haven't seen anything strange, have you? In the woods? I froze. Why do you ask? She hesitated, glancing around. There've been stories. Always have. Folks say they see things up there sometimes. Animals that aren't quite right. Dogs that watch you. One girl swore she saw her old golden retriever up by the trailhead, but he died 5 years before. A cold chill ran through me. Dogs that come back, I murmured. Mrs. Willard's eyes flicked to mine. I wouldn't go out at night. Dear, she said. They say there's something between the trees. Something that waits. I left the store with my heart pounding. That evening, I sat on the porch steps, Echo lying beside me, his head resting on my foot like an anchor. I think you've been here before, I said quietly. His tail moved once. A single, slow sweep. I think you knew my mother. Nothing, just the soft breeze, and Echo's eyes, always watching. The sun dipped below the hills, and the air turned colder. The trees across the field swayed gently, and then, they stopped, not the wind, just the trees that as if something had passed through them, and silenced them. Echo stood, stiff. Silent, his eyes locked on the woods, and I felt it too, that same presence from the dream. From the clearing. From the photo, something waiting, something returning. Suddenly, Echo stepped forward, toward the woods, not fast. Not afraid, with purpose. Echo. I called, standing out. He didn't stop. That I ran after him, barefoot across the grass, the air sharp against my skin. Wait. But he was already at the edge of the trees. That he turned once, just long enough for our eyes to meet, and then he vanished into the dark. I stood frozen at the tree line, staring into the shadows. Echo. I whispered. No sound, no footsteps, just the wind, and then, faint and far, a bark, short, sharp, calling me. The forest was darker than I remembered, not because it was night, the moon was high and full, painting the path in silver and shadow. But something about the trees had changed. They stood taller now. Closer. Watching, just like he used to. I moved slowly, barefoot on cold soil, my breath visible in the air. Every instinct in my body screamed to turn back, to go home, to lock the door and wait for morning, but I couldn't leave him. I wouldn't. Echo. I called out again, louder this time. My voice cracked through the night like a stone through glass. No answer, only silence, and then, faint, soft, unmistakable, the crunch of leaves. I turned at first. I thought it was him, but it wasn't. A shape stepped into the clearing just ahead of me. Larger than Echo. Bulkier. Its eyes glowed faint red, like coals that never quite went out. It wasn't growling. Wasn't snarling, just watching, exactly like Echo always had. My knees nearly buckled. But I held my ground. Where is he? I whispered. The shape didn't move, but behind it, from the deeper shadows, came another form, familiar, silent. Echo. He stepped forward and placed himself between me and the larger dog. His stance was protective, steady, and calm, as if he had known this moment would come, and I finally understood. He wasn't here because of me. He was here for me. Echo turned his head and looked at me. For once, it wasn't that distant, patient stare this time. It was a command. Stay back. The larger dog let out a single low growl, deep and ancient and full of something I couldn't name. I opened my mouth to scream, to beg, to do something, but I couldn't move, and then it happened. Echo lunged, not with violence. Not with rage. But with purpose. The two collided in silence. No snarls. No snapping jaws. Just a clash of energy that crackled in the air. It wasn't a fight. It was a test. A reckoning, something I didn't understand, couldn't understand, playing out before me in the dark, and then, just as quickly as it began, it ended. The larger dog stepped back. Its gaze shifted from Echo to me, and for a split second, I saw something human in those red glowing eyes. A recognition, then it vanished into the trees, swallowed by shadow. Gone. Echo stood in the clearing, breathing hard. His legs trembled slightly. But he didn't fall. I ran to him, fell to my knees, and wrapped my arms around him without hesitation. I'm here, I whispered. You came back. He leaned into me. Warm. Real, present. We stayed like that for a long time, a girl and her not quite dog in the middle of a forest that no longer felt threatening. The air had shifted, the silence was no longer heavy. It was waiting to be filled again. Back home, I tended to his leg, gently washing away dirt, checking the scar tissue. He licked my hand once as I worked, then rested his head in my lap. The house no longer felt empty. I no longer felt hollow. The next morning, I returned to the studio. Sunlight spilled across the floor. I walked to the painting again, the one my mother never finished, and I stopped cold. The white space was no longer blank. It was filled, not completely. Just faint outlines. A dog. Sitting in the clearing. Watching. Echoed. My breath caught. I reached out and touched the dry brush marks. They were old. set into the canvas long before my mother passed as she knew, somehow, she had known. I opened the last sketchbook on the shelf. Inside were notes, loose scribbles, thoughts half captured in the rush of inspiration or memory, and on the final page, scrawled hastily, "He's not just a dog. He's what remains. A keeper. A guide. He found me when I needed him. He'll find her, too." That evening, I sat on the porch with Echo curled beside me. The sun was setting, the woods no longer looked haunted, they looked alive. "I think I get it now," I murmured. "You're not mine. You were never anyone's. You just come to those who need you." Echo blinked slowly. "You knew I'd break. And you were already watching. Already waiting." His tail thumped once. Over the next few weeks, the house felt different. I opened the windows. Let the breeze in. I played music. Again, soft, slow songs from my childhood. I started painting. Nothing perfect. Nothing important, just color. Life. I walked with Echo every day, not into the woods, not yet. But through the fields. Past the creek. I laughed again. Sometimes, I still cried, and every time, he was there watching, but not in the way that unnerved me anymore. And now, it was like a mirror, like he saw the parts of me I tried to hide, and stayed anyway. One morning, I woke up and he wasn't there. I searched the house. The yard, nothing. I stood at the porch, heart thudding, eyes scanning the forest edge. That he was gone, but he hadn't left, not really yet. He was in the stillness, I in the warmth lingering on the porch step, I in the brushstrokes of that half-finished painting, and most of all, in the absence of silence, because I wasn't alone anymore, not in the way that matters. That he made sure of that. People ask me sometimes, when I talk about Echo, when I show them the photos, if I ever found out where he came from. I don't tell them everything. I just say, he showed up when I needed him most. And when they laugh or shake their heads or say that's just what dogs do, I smile, because I know the truth. That he wasn't just a dog, that he was the space between grief and healing, the watcher at the window, the echo of love that never really leaves. The end.